Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we're counting down the top 10 best Blast type characters. Now, the Blast class has gone through a lot of changes in the 6.5 years the game has been out, and for the majority of those 6.5 years, the Blast class was the best or the second best class. But making this top 10 list, I sort of realized it may no longer be the perennial powerhouse that it was. I do believe that the Universal class is number one, spoiler alert, but I don't think that the Blast class is even number 2 anymore. They may be number 3, which kind of blows me away. And it has there's a lot of reasons why that is. It may be that updates recently have not been kind to Blast types. It may be that a lot of Blast types have been converted into Universals, and that sort of tips the scales of balance, and the sort of tips the balance of power from one to the other. But yeah, it's a really interesting idea and sort of thing to plot out as the years progressed, because by and large, 2017, 2018, 2019, it was just blast all up in your face. But not so much anymore, not so much. So yeah, we're gonna give honorable mention, like I just showed, to Scarlet Witch. She's not on this list, but she's obviously an amazing Universal type now, but originally a Blast type. Same thing sort of with Vision. Also, shout out to Gambit, who's not on this list. I'll explain why. He could be on this list. He'd probably be around number 9 or number 10 if he were, but I'm not going to be putting him on this list for reasons that I will now explain. So, starting us off at number 10, we actually have a character that right now is wearing a Universal uniform, Jean Grey. And I put her on this list sort of as a legacy pick, just because I've been playing this game long enough to remember how dominant Jean used to be. And all it takes, it doesn't even take a new uniform. All it takes is you using her in PvP to remember how toxic she can be, basically all because of Phoenix Awakens. But it definitely helps her that even 2 years after, or almost 2 years now after her last uniform, and 3 years since this uniform, or 2.5 years since this uniform, she is still so tanky. She's one of the only characters in the game with a heal based on the damage that she takes. Like, the more damage you do to her after she uses Bonds of Destiny, the more she'll heal back. So she heals a base amount of 6%, and that can scale up based on how much damage she receives, which is just ridiculous. It's an accumulation-based healing system. And we've seen this on I think it's on one other character, but I can't exactly remember. I would love it if the devs started to apply this more. Like, for example, Hulk should have an accumulation-based heal, because the more damage you deal to Hulk, the stronger and the more tanky he gets. But anywho, I digress. That pairs together perfectly with the fact that she's one of the only characters, or I believe the only character in the game, rocking 100% base resistances. I cannot tell you how OP that is for PvP. Any character who deals any kind of elemental damage, doesn't matter if it's physical elemental or energy elemental, they will be completely wrecked by Jean Grey's based 100. And look at the mind resist goes to 140, which is disgusting. Actually, I don't know if that's my cards, but no, it's not my cards. So yeah, her resistances are just insane, and that's why, in my opinion, she's still top 10. She still makes combat types a risky gamble in PvP because of that, but really her value is only in PvP, so that's why I didn't really push her any higher on the list. And you could definitely argue that Gambit deserves that 10th spot over her, but I'm gonna put her there just because she was once the queen, and I don't really want to anger her into resurrection. Coming in at number 9, we have Ebony Maw, and Ebony Maw doesn't do as much as a lot of the other characters on this list in any one game mode, but I do think he's a sort of jack of all trades type character. He's got an amazing leadership for all allies. He's got an amazing passive on his uniform for all allies, so you can see it really affects everyone in the game. It applies to Universal types, which is a little bit more specific, but we sort of forget that on top of having those crazy buffs, he's also a solid character on his own. His own buffs read like Hela's uniform buffs, which everybody goes crazy about, right? It applies to self, by the way. Increases damage dealt to heroes and increases damage dealt to villains. Yeah, he's not a bad character at all, right? You take him into content with a double mind damage obelisk or a CTP of judgment, and he can really put down a lot of damage And I think a lot of players just immediately shoehorned him in as a PvP support, the new or the new Colossus, the anti-molecule man support, and he is all of those things. But with 3 very easily cancelable skills that all combo together, even though I didn't combo them properly here, 5, 4, and then 3, there you go. You actually have a character that can rack up a ton of hits and also has one of the coolest, most original looking tier 3 skills. So I honestly think that Ebony Maw is underrated. He can go well into the 30s, by the way. He can solo stage 30 of Null World Boss Legend with a CTP of Judgment. I have an insight on him now as a support type, but I think he's kind of underrated as a standalone character, and I think he's solid and deserves to be on this list. At number 8, we have KINGO, the master of spam cancel. Now, like Doctor Strange, I think a lot of players are just going to default to saying that KINGO is not as good as he appears, or it just takes too much work. It's too difficult to really learn how to play KINGO, and that's why he sort of loses points in a lot of players' minds, and I can understand that. But not only does he have extremely flashy skills, but he's just so cool, and this combo is just so satisfying to constantly let off these bursts of 2 and have the arena just filled with this golden light as KINGO just goes off on you and does insane amounts of damage. That bubble shield that he drops is also really solid. Like, it stays there, it heals you, it's got really cool animations. And yeah, he does have apparently some use for Alliance Conquest and PvP. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using him for that, but I think, he's one of those characters, sort of like Shang-Chi and others, that is being undervalued at the moment because their best CTP for PvE doesn't have the Pierce synergy that we're used to with Judgment, with Energy, or possibly even with Destruction. But I think he does do really well, and he has all of those, passives that make him really good leadership Eternals for lots of different content at a pretty high level. Similar to his protege, number 7, Doctor Strange is the originator of the my skill is going to let me spam cancel my other skills to infinity. And Doctor Strange is kind of the OG in Marvel Future Fight. He's basically been good since he came out in 2016 in one way or another, and all of it has to do with his second skill. It's actually not even his passive, it's his second skill right there. The removes all buffs from target. That, combined with the fact that his Vishanti Destruction resets the cooldown on all of his other skills for 7 seconds, that combination of ideas means that Doctor Strange will forever be the best character for Shadowland, for Dimension or Timeline Survival, and any other content where the enemies will put up buffs, like insanely powerful buffs, reduce all incoming damage by 99%, and then Doctor Strange will just say, boop, magic, and take those buffs away, and then time freeze you, and then kill you. He's literally the easy button from Staples for those game modes. And I know that Timeline Survival and Shadowland are not the most difficult pieces of content, or they're not the most popular pieces of content, or they're not the most rewarding pieces of content. I know that. But this is not a ranking of the best characters in content that is worthwhile, because that's such a weird, obscure thing to rank. This is just the best Blast characters. And if you're the best character in the game for 2 different game modes out of 66 of your type, and out of 248 total characters, you're better than native tier 3 Mephisto with a brilliant Judgment, there's just no way, right? You can take Doctor Strange into any stage of Shadowland regardless of the requirements, and he just takes the requirements away and nukes the stage. You can take him into any stage of Timeline Survival and he nukes. Oh, and by the way, if that's not enough power for you, removing all buffs on the second skill, how about we perpetually remove all buffs on the tier 3 skill and inflict paralysis and incapacitation and 60% all defense down. Not to mention that, not to mention the fact, so he's great for those game modes. He's okay for World Boss Legend and stuff like that. He's got a great leadership for World Boss, he's pretty good for World Boss Legend or World Boss Ultimate. He's got a great leadership for World Boss Legend, and he's important, almost vital for one-shotting World Boss Ultimate bosses with different techniques. So yeah, for all those reasons, I think he's a solid rank 7, even though he may not be individually good as any of the other characters on the list at any one piece of content besides the 2 game modes that I mentioned. On the other hand, number 6, Human Torch is very, very good at a few select game modes. And the one I actually want to focus on is not World Boss Ultimate and how he can one-shot Ebony and other things. It's not World Boss Legend, where he can climb up to the 30s against Null and Mephisto. And it's not even ABX, where he's kind of decent. It's actually Story Mode. Human Torch is still one of the fastest. He's blazing fast for story mode, and he just flies through the content at an absurd speed that I still have not seen another character do. Here we go. Human Torch absolutely flying through this stage. The targeting alone on his 4th skill is worth the price of admission. He literally clears this stage faster, this floor of the stage faster than the game can register that he's retrieved the ISO 8. So everyone's dead, everything's gone, and he's just sitting there waiting like Flash, you know, like the Flash, not Flash Thompson, but like Flash, just waiting there at the finish line while the, you know, person is waiting to pull the trigger to signal the start of the fight. This is another amazing example here. We're going to start right here, and we're just going to zip through the entire map. It's over. Ladies and gentlemen, there is not a single character in this game who can do that with one skill and just zip from the beginning of the dungeon all the way to the end and kill everyone. Now, I'm going to back out here because I don't actually want to register this mission because I do want to farm the fragments. But yeah, I got to say that that is actually worth a lot, being able to clear those stages so incredibly fast. And not to mention, like I said, he's amazing for World Boss Ultimate, amazing for World Boss Legend, solid for ABX. Very, very strong character still, even though it's a hotly contested Transcended character ranking. So yeah, he's definitely number 6, and he could honestly be number 5. I sort of flip-flop between him and the other number 5, and the number 5 is Cable. But like I'm saying, before we get into why Cable is number 5, I would definitely say that you could put Human Torch 5, and you could put Cable 6th. The reason why I focus on Cable at number 5 is he's one of the lone mutants. He's still holding it down all these years later, and he's one of the few characters that has, you know, this completely different build based on, not completely different build, but a pretty different build and rotation based on which uniform you're looking to use him with. So with this uniform, a CTP of Rage is honestly better, and he makes better use of his tier 3 skill, so he has a different rotation that focuses on building up to the tier 3 and then popping off, whereas this uniform, just straight up old school Cable 2017 style, where you're using a CTP of energy, you're stacking tons of chain hit damage, and you're just stacking everything onto the 5th skill, not even using the 6th skill, just using it for the buff to go back onto the 5th skill. So you really have an interesting character when it comes to the playstyle. And the playstyle doesn't mean that he gets better or worse with one uniform or the other. Both of these uniforms are capable of insane ABX scores, high value, you know, huge burst damage and huge scores in squad battle, and really good performance in both World Boss Ultimate and World Boss Legend. Probably the only thing he's kind of missing is more survivability at that point, but that's really the only thing that you can hold back Cable from. And he's honestly not bad. He's a huge sleeper pick, but he's honestly not terrible for PvP. And I haven't really mentioned PvP at all outside of Ebony Maw for this tier list because blast types in general have not been solid for PvP. If you look at all the characters we've gotten recently, and even if we look at the staples of the blast class, they've never really been PvP powerhouses. And Cable's actually kind of not bad in a weird way. But anywho, that brings us to now the top 4 characters. And sort of like the speed class, I do feel like the blast class is, and the combat class is a bit top heavy. The top 3 for the blast class are hotly contested. So we'll jump into number 4, which is actually Cersei. And some people would think that she's number 3. I'm going to put her at number 4 because I place a little bit less value on PvP. But Cersei is probably the best. She's number 1 in Marvel Future Fight as a blast type, not overall, but within the blast category. Cersei, I think, is number 1 if you're looking for a two-way character, a character that's going to be very good for you in PvE and simultaneously very good for you in PvP. And the PvE focus really comes down to the Sharon Rogers accumulation plus easily cancelable skills, you know, invincibility. She's got charm. She's got all these different buffs, effects. She's got a heal, right? And she's got that crazy transcendence burst damage skill, which you can easily combo at the beginning of a battle or at the beginning of a DRX match or whatever to just burst down the boss. Unlike Sharon Rogers, who has to build up the tier 3, Cersei doesn't have to wait. And then you couple that with, oh yeah, by the way, her passive is insane for PvE content. But then you couple that with one of the most busted artifacts in the game, a revive. She's the first character to get a revive as part of her artifact, and it makes her a perennial threat for PvP. I'm actually testing her out, sort of experimenting with a tankier, more defensive build on her. I had a Mighty Greed, and I was using her more as like a bazooka. but I'm gonna see if she can sort of hang with the characters and sort of last longer, get off more skills, get off more kills with a more defensive build, because her HP is not quite as good as some of the other combat types. You can see Jean Grey's at like 100,000, whereas she's only about 88 with Odin's Blessing investment. So her defensive stats aren't quite as good for PvP as some of the other Blast tank characters for PvP, but I think she does a really good job of offering you the best of both worlds. And I mean, even with this build, she'll still be able to do a pretty decent job in PvE, and she'll outclass most Blast characters just because of that insane 15% accumulation, the crazy passive, and the transcendent skill. Which means at number 3 we have Moonstone. Now this one is a little bit difficult. I know some people think Moonstone may deserve to be number 2 or number 1, but I'm gonna put her at number 3 because number 2 and number 1 are just a little bit more special. But Moonstone came out a year ago, and people thought, you know, as amazing as she was, she's gonna get replaced. And then updates came and updates went, and Moonstone never got replaced. Moonstone is still one of the best characters in the game for just insane burst damage, and she basically was the first character to sort of ruin DRX with how insane her burst damage is. And you just see the hits rack up, you see the damage, you see the accumulation, you see all these buffs, and yeah, deceptively easy to play, but, well, I would say easy to play but deceptively hard to master. Moonstone is still sort of an enigma in the community, and actually players are starting to realize that a Mighty Destruction might be a better option for her than an Energy, which is kind of interesting, because the one thing that Moonstone lacks is her third skill is where you end her combo, and it's a bit slow to get into. The Moonlight Stomp, she sort of rises up slowly and then enters an iframe, which gives your enemies ample time to either move out of the way, which would be unfortunate, or hit you and guard break you. She doesn't have super armor. That's really her only weakness. She's got an insane heal, right? This thing pops an 8% heal like 10 times. So she's like Shang-Chi. She heals up from 5% to 100% just with this one attack. She's got crazy buffs, right? 30% all attack there. What else does she have here? Accumulation, right? Which is nuts there with mind control. I didn't even know she had mind control, bro. She doesn't need mind control because she's killing everyone. She's got a 40-40 frenzy buff. She's honestly busted offensively. But really her only weakness is that you can interrupt her because of the fact that she doesn't have super armor. She has 20% guaranteed dodge though. So yeah, you just solve that one riddle, or you learn to play around it, and you have one of the highest burst damage characters in the game. And the really nice thing about Moonstone, unlike other transcended characters, because let's be honest, most transcended characters have a lot of burst damage, right? Because you can pop the transcended skill right away. So the burst damage is right there. But some other transcended characters, I would say most other transcended characters, a great example is Human Torch, have really low damage on their regular 1 2 3 4 5 combo. Not that you would do 1 2 3 4 5 in that order, but you get what I'm saying. And really the majority of their damage comes from 6. Oh, Moonstone is not that way at all. As long as you have the 4th skill to give you that accumulation, the 4 cancel 5 cancel 3 combo is destructive. She almost does as much, not quite as much damage, but she does a very respectable amount of damage with just the 4-5-3 combo. So she's one of the few transcended characters who has very consistent damage and has insane burst damage, which almost seems paradoxical, because it's like, how can you have insane burst damage and consistent damage? Well, if your name is Moonstone, that's how. Which leads us to our 2 top Blast characters in Marvel Future Fight, and I know who you're thinking is number 1, but he's actually number 2, Mephisto. And this is going to be an interesting discussion when we get to number 1, but I'm not going to talk about why Mephisto is not number 1. Instead, I'm going to be talking about why he's number 2. Honestly, I wanted to make Mephisto number 1 just because of how cool Dark Awakening is. He's the first character in the game to have a transforming skill, and when he transforms, it changes the effects on his skills, his other skills, and it changes the animation on one of his skills, Underworld Explosion. And you can see the little arrows there showing you that when you are buffed or when you're not buffed, the basic effect and the Dark Awakened transformation effect change, and they change in a very thematic way. The base Mephisto is going to do more damage to villains, which makes him better for PvP. The transformed Mephisto is going to do more damage to heroes, which makes him better. Sorry, flip that around. So the base Mephisto This is a little bit confusing, but anyways, the base Mephisto is going to do more damage to heroes, which makes him better for PvP. And then the transformed Mephisto is going to do more damage to villains, which makes him better for PvE. So you basically get two characters in one. And you not only get that in terms of the buffs and in terms of the animations and things like that, but you get that in terms of the looks. Because you have this Mephisto here who's going to really torment you in PvP with this skill. Like, this skill is so toxic. It's got silence, it's got mind control, it's got burn, right? It's got everything. It's got high damage, accumulation. He's also got the accumulation heal, I believe, like Jean Grey. I knew there was another important character that had that. But then you pop the transformation. He turns into the Goat Man. He gets bigger, which we highlighted in the Hulk ranking is just so cool. And now he does more damage to villains, and he has this insanely cool tornado skill. His accumulation changes from damage taken to damage dealt, which is always better, almost always better for PvE. And then he has this crazy tier 3 where he transforms again into this final sort of snake-like, Jafar-like creature form, and then he blows up the arena. Honestly, there aren't. I was gonna say there are very few, but there are not. There are no other characters in the game that are this cool and that have this much variety in their kit. It is honestly so dope, and as much as I want Mephisto to retain his uniqueness, I really want the devs to do this again, because it is just way too cool to not have on multiple characters. He's just so dope, and he's surprisingly good for PvP, especially now with the combat types rising. Gilgamesh, Wolverine, you know, Hulk is still there, Luke Cage. He's surprisingly good for PvP, and he's got a revive. Like, he's basically just a better version of other Blast characters for PvP. He's just not utilized in PvP because of how dominant he is in PvE. So that sort of tells you how amazing a character is when it's like they're good at B, but they're so good at A that we're not even going to use them for B, right? Even though you could, and you could win. My Wolverine dies to Mephisto's. Surprise, surprise. Which is, why he definitely deserves rank 2 and almost. He's basically rank 1B. But of course, there can only be one, and at the top of the Blast list, basically since she came out into the game, we have your girl, Sharon Rogers. Now, Sharon Rogers may not actually be overall as good as Mephisto in all game modes. If you tally up how valuable she is and you give her a score, let's say out of 10 for every single game mode, and then you add up all those scores and divide it by the number of game modes, and you do the same thing for Mephisto. It's a long-winded explanation, I know, but basically what I'm saying is she doesn't have any PvP value, whereas Mephisto has insane PvP value. But what Mephisto has in PvP value, he lacks, or he what she doesn't have in PvP value, she makes up for with insane value. Basically the best cost to value or sort of return on investment, right? She has the highest return on investment of any character I've ever seen. The game literally gives you Sharon Rogers for free. You just have to get her newest uniform, and then she will just blow up the game for you. Literally blow up the game. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen players finally crack the code on how to play Sharon Rogers with an obelisk, with any build, whatever, doesn't matter, janky, no cards, whatever, dust, Cheeto fingers, and then they message in the Discord or they message online or Twitter or whatever, and they're like, bro, Sharon Rogers just finished the stage in 10 seconds, and they realize the pure raw power of Sharon Rogers, and really it's because of the accumulation. That's really what it is. But her damage has just always scaled so insanely well. She's a cannon's cannon. There's just no words. She's the ultimate bazooka. One of the, always has been and basically always will be one of the top DPS characters in Marvel Future Fight for any PvE content, regardless. Squad battle, ABX. Like, ABX is maybe the only game mode where she doesn't shine, but squad battle, World Boss Ultimate, World Boss Legend, GBR, like anything, any game mode, you name it. If she can accumulate, she's gonna, and then she's just gonna wipe the floor with you. And the reason why I gave her the first place over Mephisto is the value. Mephisto's a very expensive character and he's very good, but nothing competes with Sharon, right? The highest return on investment for any character in the game, and in a game of 250 characters, that definitely matters. So yeah, that's my ranking for the top 10 Blast characters in Marvel Future Fight. Hit me up in the comments with your top 10 for Blast, and let me know what you're expecting from the final ranking list for Universals. Thanks so much for watching. Smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.